video game music. The thing that I and many other people hold in high regard because of the impact it leaves on the games as a whole. It's an aspect of games that is so important to many players because it is part of what forms a game's lasting identity in the gaming ecosystem. From the iconicness of Super Mario Bros. 1-1 to the quiet beauty of Breath of the Wild soundtrack, this topic mesmerizes me by the broad impact of the art form that is music on the games themselves. It's a category of music that I have seen thrown to the side in the industry, overlooked despite the iconicness of some game music and the absolute bangers that this industry is filled with. Video game music is music in the same way Miss Dan Schneider Escapee and Not the Weekday is. And I don't believe the reputation that game music has is entirely fair when a game's soundtrack is so important to what people remember from a game. I'm going to be talking about a bunch of specific games and also be talking in general here, so bear with me. Also, if this sounds like a college research paper, yeah, that's because it was. If it sounds like brain rot, that's because I'm mentally ill. So join me as I justify years of bullying for liking the Persona 5 soundtrack, as I use a clip of me attempting to play Megalovania on the keyboard as a transition to the actual video. When it comes to video game music, I feel like the most absolute surface level benefit that music brings to games is what it does for the setting and atmosphere of any given game or series. Music and sound design need to fulfill the role of providing and conveying the feelings that the visuals are also trying to convey. When it comes to music and setting, there is basically always some type of correlation between the tone of the music and the environment. And I think this all comes together to serve the general purpose of establishing a game's identity and sense of character. There's this concept used in scoring movies that can also be used in scoring video game music called diegetic music, or in normal people words, music that is heard or played by the characters within the universe. Think things like the Ocarina of Time or any other Zelda instrument, Persona 5 Royal's Jazz Cafe, and Kirby and Heifer Gore's Waddle Dee Band. The characters acknowledge the music and sound around them, making it a part of their universe. Xenoblade 3, for example, literally has the two main characters play flutes to send off the deceased. This is not the last time this game will come up in the video, oh my god. But by far, one of my favorite examples of diegetic music is the stupid Squid Game franchise has by far some of the most unique soundtracks I have ever heard. This series basically fucking lives and breathes diegetic music. See, the devs really like the idea of making this game feel very lived in, so every time you open one of the games, you are gonna watch the fucking news, goddammit, or not, and be greeted by the in-universe idols. In all of the game's in-game events, Splatfest, these idols will be singing all of the battle music throughout the event. Characters are also seen partying in whatever plaza you're in, dancing along to music as well. But that's not the only place that happens. It happens in normal multiplayer battles as well through in-universe bands. Holy shit, this is so cool. Added to the fact that all of the multiplayer songs are sung in an Animal Crossing like gibberish language, these bands just make this world feel lived in, like an actual civilization that could occur if the did happen. Oh yeah, this is unrelated to what we're talking about, but the Salmon Run music in Splatoon 3 is just really silly. It just keeps getting longer and longer, oh my god. The devs also filled the single player with many incidents where the characters acknowledge the music of the game, or the players are given hints that the music in the background is something that exists within the world. Amongst small things like the third game CDs that you collect, the entire franchise's recurring nuisance, DJ Octavio, literally plays music as you fight him and talks about it getting faster and shit. Bro, this is so cool. Splatoon 2's Octo expand. Splatoon 2's The best part of a dumpster literally has its own band unique to this DLC campaign that plays most of the music throughout the campaign. And the singer is a fucking test subject for the... Splatoon is not even close to the end of good examples of diegetic music in video games, but there is also an opposite side of this nerdy-ass word called non-diegetic music, or otherwise known as underscoring. This is music that is not heard by anyone within the game's universe. If you want an easy comparison for what non-diegetic music actually is, It's a concept that originates in the film industry. It's an external source to amplify the environment or a scenario's tone. The music itself is never acknowledged by the characters, and in film at least, will have a set time that it starts and ends since film is not interactive. In terms of examples, I mean most video games feature non-diegetic music, so I think I'ma just mention a few of my favorites. Kirby and the Forgotten Lands, Northeast Frost Street is like by far some of the most beautiful pieces I have ever heard in this franchise, giving off this curious sensation as you begin to explore this abandoned, snow-filled cityscape. And then as you get further into the level, the song crescendos into something even more curious and wonderful. Only to then end with a triumphant conclusion as you find the end of the level. That curiosity that the environment and visuals feed you now finally being satisfied. I'm gonna lose my shit. The Danganronpa franchise also uses non-diegetic music, almost always trying to go for the feeling of isolation, just in different ways. Trigger Happy Havoc is the best example at this, in my opinion, with an oppressive ass atmosphere being amplified with shit like this as you explore the school. The sequel, however, does something similar, but it's a lot less oppressive than that of the first game to go along with the tropical setting. Two of my favorite examples of this type of music, though, are the Ori games and A Hat in Time. A Hat in Time's OST, to put it simply, is just a straight banger. It doesn't do anything too interesting, but it always conveys the setting through its music with the best bangers ever. From the horrors of Subcon Forest to the peacefulness of the time riffs. The music is always properly fitting whatever the setting is calling for and giving some of the best bangers ever. But anyways, the boss themes, dude, do you hear this? The Ori games take a much more reserved, almost film-like approach to its non-diegetic music. The music will be more reserved, still great, but reserved, to make you feel like you are truly alone within the forest. However, in the chase sequences and Will-o'-the-Wisps boss fights, the tracks will be much more dynamic, build on themselves as you fight and continue to run away from your imminent danger. It's the type of soundtrack that is not necessarily complex in what it's trying to do, like A Hat in Time, but it nails the setting and specific moments with its non-diegetic music. But by far the most raw and swag example I got on me has to do with the stupid blue rat that I love to shit on from time to time.
Here we go!
Sonic Unleashed soundtrack is so fucking cool. Basically, the game is a globe-trotting adventure story, meaning Sonic visits a bunch of real-world inspired locations, and also meaning that the music is inspired from those in the real-world cultures. Oh my god! The game's got a day and night cycle, with the more rock-inspired soundtrack for the daytime levels, and a jazz-inspired soundtrack for the nighttime levels. And both have unique instrumentations for each country and culture that you visit. It is so cool! In an interview with the lead composer for the series, Tomoyo Otani, explains that the unique instrumentation for this game was very intentional. He says that to express regional characteristics in music clearly, we chose an instrument to represent each country to develop our imagination from there,
before we actually started composing. For example, the bamboo flute for Missouri, the accordion for Spagonia, erhu for Chunan, gamelan for Autobot, etc. Those instruments were played and recorded live. One of the important challenges was to express the difference of day and night stages in music, and we fucking did it because music is the only thing this series is good for.
This soundtrack is so fucking cool, man. Otani's intention to make you truly feel like you're going to different parts of the world and consuming different cultures is fully realized and then some. Say what you want about the game itself. But this soundtrack is by far one of the best in the series that's known for its banger music. There are so many other examples of games that do this type of shit, and I know I am very much cherry picking the games that are close to me, but I strongly encourage you to look closer at how the music enhances the setting and atmosphere. And with that, it's time to talk about something a little bit more complex. Music is one of the best things a game can convey about its narrative and is a large part of the emotions that you take from the game. To start with the most simple thing, let's talk about mood and tone, or better yet, musical storytelling. Music's most basic function in film is to supplement the visuals with whatever mood the scene is asking for. Outside of purely supplementing the setting, which is also relevant to the narrative, the music can represent the mood and tone of the story. Take the Danganronpa example I just mentioned. The setting is very closed in, yes, and the music will reflect that, but the oppressive tone of the music also represents the trapped feeling of the entire cast of characters. But by far, one of my favorite examples of this simplistic approach to musically affecting narrative is in Majora's Mask Final Hours. It is by far the lowest, most dire point narratively speaking. The entire world is about to end. The people of Clocktown are scrambling, wondering if they're gonna make it to the next day, and the only thing that is playing is the sound of a clock and the sound of pure, utter despair. Sonic Chronicles OST is funny. Anyway, something that has always been a lot more interesting to me in terms of musical storytelling is the concept of leitmotifs and themes. When it comes to video game music, themes are typically described as melodies that are quote-unquote tied to a character's setting, dramatic idea, or overarching idea. These can be entire songs, stuff like the boss battle theme from Xenoblade 3 making me shit my pants, and in my opinion, reflecting the terror the characters feel internally as they fight against their representations of their broken world. Or how they use this melody like all the fucking time, making this the entire theme of Passing on the Dead. Holy shit, help me. If you haven't caught on because I'm a rambling idiot, these can also be shorter melodies as well. But more interesting is that these themes are often created by leitmotifs, or in normal people words, recognizable melodies throughout a game's soundtrack that help assist players understand different aspects of the game, such as another character, mood, environment, or object to make the game more comprehensible. Stuff like how when you open a chest in Zelda, you almost always hear the... When it comes to musical storytelling and how a game's music can enhance the narrative, for me, this is the real shit, and the coolest ass shit ever. So with that said, spoiler warnings for these two games. Holy shit, I'm really about to justify the use of bullying, huh? Well anyways, I consider Persona 5 Royal and Undertale masterclasses in musical storytelling. Both use leitmotifs to convey the ideas about their narratives and relationships between their characters. Persona 5 has a few leitmotifs, but by far, my favorite and the most spoilery has to do with the motif that begins in Swear to My Bones, a song meant to represent the start of something in life that you devote yourself to. It comes up in the story when the Phantom Thieves are first formed, resolving themselves to reform society, and whenever you get the second awakening of your party members' personas. The motif then appears right before you're literally about to kill God, used to show the absolute conviction of the Phantom Thieves to reject the authority of those who claim to be of higher power than them. The final appearance is in the ending, or the credits, where the Phantom Thieves go their separate ways with their minds set on living life through their own choices, connected by the bonds they form with each other through their conviction to reform society. This leitmotif is one of conviction, and is present pretty much the entire game if you are to deepen your bonds with your party, making the impact of the motif stronger depending on how you decide to spend your time. Undertale does a very similar thing with one of its leitmotifs, that being the one that goes with this little shit and is a more character-focused leitmotif, and you could say it's this character's entire theme. Your Best Friend is the melody that first plays when you meet this puntable piece of shit, and it's a short motif that in any other game would be used to welcome the player. It's a melody that is seemingly happy and friendly, used to deceive you when reality hits. This melody appears in two different places. At the end of the neutral route when you're fighting what the fuck, and at the end of the pacifist route when you're trying to fight wannabe god. See, it's cool because both of these instances involve Flowey, so the motif appearing in both of these moments represent the difference in relationships at each point in the story. I like to just focus on one of these instances though, that being in the song Your Best Nightmare. This song is so interesting to me because it shows different characteristics of the abomination you're fighting and the human souls. Basically, throughout the first phase of the battle, the motif plays whenever you are in a phase to get one of the human souls on your side. Each time the motif comes up, the end of the musical phrase is different, representing the different emotions of each human soul. Each quote-unquote answer or end to the motif makes it so much more satisfying narratively and musically when those different endings to the motif are rectified into something more satisfying in the second half of the battle, where the song Finale plays. I just think motifs are cool as shit, even when they don't necessarily have to do with the narrative or characters. But when they do have something to do with the narrative though, I think that it makes the good use of motifs pay off much more in terms of creating memorable moments. So I highly recommend paying attention to stuff like this when listening to game music. I guarantee that you will come out on the other side with a newfound appreciation for the games themselves. And the moments the motifs play will have you bouncing up and down like an idiot. Obviously, motifs and themes are not the only way music conveys aspects of narrative, but it's an interesting part of a more broad topic that makes the brainworms in me happy. Before we move on though, I'd like to mention lyrics as well, because the addition of lyrics or insert songs can elevate certain moments, especially in the climax of more story-based games, to new heights. They will often represent the ideals, motivations, goals of the characters, or just convey a certain idea about the game itself. Think shit like the vocal themes in Sonic the Hedgehog, Guilty Gear, Final Fantasy, Persona, the ending theme of Portal 2, the fucking Ed Sheeran song in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, the fucking DK rap dude, oh my god! Every example I just mentioned has vocal themes that either represent the ideals of their characters or songs that represent what the game is all about. I'm not going to go into a specific example for the sake of my sanity. I don't feel like doing some lyrical analysis bullshit, but here's a list of my favorites. We need to move on though now, so let's talk about some nerd shit and one of the most important functions of music in video games. It's hard to actually explore this topic without mentioning that gameplay is largely enhanced by music and sound design. To be transparent here, in my research paper on this very same topic, I mentioned a more pretentious bitch concept called modular smoothness in video game music, but that's the name that makes me want to go. Instead, we're going to use the term adaptive music, because it's essentially the same thing, and talk about how this impacts the gameplay. Basically, the idea is that music changes based on what the player does in the game, meaning scoring for a game is a whole lot different from making music for films or TV. The music will always be the same for all consumers when it comes to TV and film. It is not interactive, but for games, the developers and composers have to accommodate for the fact players will experience the music in many different ways or orders. Essentially, essentially meaning that game composers have to make their music adaptive, be able to change based on what the player does. It's some cool shit. An easy example of adaptive music is essentially anytime you're on the last lap of a Mario Kart race where the track that was playing the whole time is now faster to indicate, hey fucker, go fast. Baby Park takes this idea and runs with it, having the music in the background get faster and faster for each lap. It's so cool. The thing that's coolest to me for some reason is something I found out through this video, where in Mario Kart Wii, the music on the menu gets more and more dynamic the closer you get to racing. Oh my god, it's so cool! Obviously, there's more complicated examples, say for example in Nier Automata, where the game's music adapts based on what endings you've gotten so far or how long you've been in an area. Another cool as shit example is in the Mario Galaxy game, which let me just say, fucking nail most auditory aspects. I don't think a Mario game has come this close to perfection in conveying its setting, but anyways, have you seen the fucking ball, dude? This shit speeds up and slows down depending on how fast you move the ball. It's so silly, I need to be put down. But by far, one of my favorite examples of adaptive music in games is in Celeste. Spoiler warning, by the way. Lena Raine did an amazing job as the game's composer, conveying the anxiety of Madeline climbing the mountain and confronting the other part of herself, and of the player as you fend for your life. Fuck! For a more specific example, Chapter 6 is the climax of the conflict between Madeline and her other half, and as you get closer and closer to confronting your other half, the music builds on itself, representing a gameplay and a narrative function. It's so hype. Fuck, I died again. Animal Crossing does a similar thing too with adaptive music as well, but doesn't really impact the game at all. I just think it's cool. The music changes based on the time of day, and it'll change in real time. It's swag. Too bad that New Horizons sucks. I think it should also be stated that music and sound design by extension are critical to enhancing what you get from the gameplay and how well you do, adaptive or not. For me at least, turning off the music basically turns the game from being fun to a mindless task that my thumbs are doing. Suddenly the game feels lifeless, make John Cage 433 look like the best shit ever. I play worse, I enjoy the game less, and I don't appreciate the small intricacies of how the music and sound design benefit the game itself. I'm not the only one feeling this type of way either. Some studies have indicated that the music within games enhance player performance. After asking my Twitter followers and friends, the overwhelming majority of them said that they also believe music makes them play better and that they enjoy the games more, sometimes elaborating that it's one of the most important aspects of a game, or that they'll turn it off only in certain instances, like if it's a multiplayer game or some other menial task in a game. Oh my god. Among my research, it was basically impossible to ignore the fact that single-player games especially benefit from music, and it totally makes sense. JRPGs, for example, completely fall apart without their music. While there are some examples where this isn't completely the case, games like Pokemon, ones where their visual presentation are just not distinct enough, the music is a big part of why these games are even interesting to play. Without all of their aspects of their presentation working together, battling in these games, especially ones with turn-based systems, turns into simple menuing until the enemy is dead. They rely on music and visual presentation to give the player feedback, so taking away one part of that equation away, such as the music, will make the gameplay feel empty. RPGs aren't even the only genre where music and presentation is a key to success. Rhythm games literally could not exist without their music. It's in the name. These games rely on pure auditory skills and recognition for the gameplay to work, so the music is pretty much a necessity for these games to function. There is one game I'd like to give a special mention though. One game that is so genuinely interesting to me that I didn't even realize my fondness for it until years later. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is one of those games that so obviously does not need an introduction, but does something so genuinely interesting with its music. It could be a contender for exceeding in pretty much anything I've talked about so far. The game's music is the more ambient type. Editor's note. I'm using Tears of the Kingdom footage because I'm a lazy fuck. If you have a problem with that, eat shit. The music in these games do very similar things. It doesn't matter that much. But mainly Tears of the Kingdom is just slightly more lively than that of Breath of the Wild. Anyways, subscribe. Okay, back to the video now. Quiet piano riffs and sounds of nature fill the sound design as you explore the open world, with the actual background tracks fans are used to save for, well, everything but the open world. The silence that consumes the open world adds on to the oppressive atmosphere, the idea that this kingdom is truly in ruins, and the most life you're gonna find outside of villages is that of a bokoblin camp or that of nature. It's a narrative thing that could only work in this context, and the typical Zelda overworld music of the past games would not work for what this game wants to accomplish. Gameplay-wise, this game's soundtrack is as adaptive and dynamic as it can be. I mean, one second you'll be wandering around, and then you'll run into an enemy and the music will accommodate for that one trigger. You'll go back to wandering around one weapon breaking session later, and then when you're wandering around, you'll hear a big uh-oh noise, and then, well, run. This soundtrack is absolutely not for everyone. I know many people have been dissatisfied for the longest time with this soundtrack because of the lack of any real bangers outside of Hyrule Castle, but this soundtrack and sound design makes my brain jump up and down like a bumbling idiot. It's a stupidly interesting look into how a limited soundtrack can impact how a game feels to play. I know for a fact that this game struggles musically in aspects unrelated to the open world. Those dungeons and boss themes are real stinkers in terms of music. But hey, those are what sequels are for. Breath of the Wild is not even close to being the only game to do this type of thing. Fuck, the sequel is probably gonna do the same exact thing with its music. But as a Zelda fan, I can very much respect the desire to attempt to do something different, to convey the emotion of a broken world through something more unconventional. I don't think this is something the series needs to do a lot more in the future, but as this soundtrack is, I consider it to be pretty unique. The title of this video and what my original research paper was about should probably signify that I truly believe that video game music is so important to how people remember the games they play. It impacts all aspects of any given game, even as far as the pause menu. This video has only truly scratched the surface so far, but I'd like to step away and talk about the best thing music does for the game it's a part of. The real power of video game music in my eyes is the power to enhance the memorability and identity of the game, as well as being able to affect many different people in many different ways, both with context or without. What I mean by identity in the music of the game is how the game is perceived by all of its audiences. Games with a unique soundtrack will be more distinct than something that is more by the books and basic. There's a reason games like the new Super Mario Bros. Franchise are frowned upon by their communities for being unoriginal. Not even the music in those games are original, and not many people remember them for a reason, despite the popularity of all of the games. There needs to be distinction, a reason that people will remember the game, not blend into the crowd. I mean, in terms of memorability, there's a reason I could play something like or there would be a large majority of the general audience, boomers, who would be able to think of the games it comes from, or even the exact place in the game where it comes from. If I were to play something like this, though, or fuck even, distinction in music is just part of what helps create a more memorable experience. The legacy titles that I literally just mentioned are as iconic as they are because they are, for one, good, and two, because their music is extremely recognizable, at the very least, to its core audience. Something like Sonic Frontiers is only as positively received as it is for not only trying something new, but also having a soundtrack that does something unique and distinct. Those Titan themes really push that game a whole ass letter grade up, holy shit. And this very thing, this distinction, alongside the preservation of music, are the very things that give the music the reach that it does on the internet and into the world. The very fact I could go into my world music college class filled with a bunch of sad, sleep-deprived music majors and then give a presentation about how video game music can help you focus, and then in that presentation I could play Coconut Mall for the haha funny, and then be asked, why'd you have to Coconut Mall us all? And then reply with, because funny, take the L. Stupidly funny and absolutely incredible. True story, by the way. Or even better, how Megalovania was played in front of the goddamn Pope, likely because Mr. FNAF Theory, open parentheses, all caps finale, close parentheses, decided to give him a copy of Undertale for some reason. That is fucking incredible. I don't even care how it's the funny skeleton song. That right there is proof that video game music is able to reach places beyond the confines of the game. It can reach, inspire, and affect people in different ways that is unrelated to what the original composers or developers intended. What inspired me to make this video was this very reason, actually. Aside from the fact I had already done a decent amount of research on it. Sometime in January, I was deep into scrolling through YouTube. I wasn't feeling great because of the stress and stuff and was looking for music when I saw a video of a game's full OST that I heard music of before but never paid much attention to, so I clicked on it and listened. That game was Valhalla, a game I have never played nor know anything about other than what's on its Steam page, and the absolute stroke of a title aside, I was moved. Not only is the shit like an actual banger for helping me focus, it is some of the most hype and chill music at the same time I have ever heard in my entire life. The personal standout track for me though is one that quite literally brought me to tears, titled You've Got Me. A piece that I have absolutely no context for from the actual game, but there is something so just reassuring about the melody, which I guess makes sense because of the title. The repetition and the climax of the song just feels desperate, I guess, and then the actual song is trying to convey the reassurance of someone being there to the melody. Oh my god, this is so cringe. I need a funny. Oh, thank God. What I'm getting at here is that video game music has the same power that any other music does. It just so happens to be made for games, and does way more outside of the game it's a part of. It can impact and inspire people, make people feel things entirely different from music people typically listen to, or it could just be a normal source of music like any other band or thing you'll listen to while wanting to bang your head against the wall trying to figure out code. Sorry, I'm projecting. Once again, I have never played, holy shit, this title. The fact I have never played it and know nothing about it should be proof that video game music is so much more than background music. This video will only truly scratch the surface of the limitless things music can do for games, let alone how it affects people, and if it wasn't already obvious, video game music is something that I am just stupidly passionate for. It does so much to enhance moments within the games themselves while also being able to reach a broader audience thanks to social media and word of mouth, and more importantly, for me at least, formed an emotional connection and deeper appreciation with the games I already love. Throughout this video, the games and soundtracks I've mentioned have been games that are generally some of my favorites, and trust me, that's never gonna change no matter how many times I talk about this subject. And I do this, one, because brain rot, and two, because just like normal music, tastes are very different from what yours might be. Games you like will likely have something in their soundtrack that resonates with you, or maybe you just haven't noticed these things yet. I don't know, I'm not you. Your connection to the music in the games you play is likely going to be based on what games you play and how much you pay attention, and that is 100% okay. I just hope that maybe, just maybe, you will pay closer attention to the music within the games you play, and maybe even deepen the appreciation you have for the games that you love. Thanks for watching. Hi everyone, welcome to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed. I've been working on this for like over a month and a half. I kind of like died inside a little making this, mainly because, oh, holy fuck, I want to move on now. But I've been learning Adobe Premiere, and it's my favorite. It sure is my favorite program ever. I hope you enjoyed. Have a good day. Subscribe. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.